My name is Clara, and this year, Christmas morning didn't begin with carols or cinnamon rolls. It started with me standing on a porch I helped pay for, holding a tin of ginger cookies in one hand and a Lego set in the other. I was wearing a green knit sweater Logan had once called my Christmas tree armor, and I told myself that would be enough to earn a smile. The driveway was empty except for Josh's truck. Their front yard still had last year's inflatable snowman, half deflated, collapsed sideways like it had finally given up pretending. I parked on the street, sat in my car for a minute longer than I should have, and then took a breath I'd practiced a dozen times. It's just a visit, I told myself, just a quick drop-off. But deep down, I already knew I wouldn't be staying. I could feel it in the silence of the house, in how none of the curtains shifted when I pulled up, in how no one opened the door even after the second ring. When it finally opened, Josh stood there. No smile, no Merry Christmas, just him in a hoodie and slippers, his eyes already braced like he expected a fight. He didn't step aside, didn't ask how I was. He just said, flat as drywall, "You weren't invited, Clara." Behind him, I heard movement. Tiny feet on hardwood. Logan's voice was bright and curious. "Is that Grandma?" Josh leaned back, just enough to block the view inside. His jaw tightened. "Claire's asleep. We're trying to keep the morning quiet." I looked down at the wrapped gift, then at the cookies. I tried to hand them over without saying much, just a smile I stitched together with the last thread of hope I had left. He didn't take them. "Just leave them," he said. That was the moment. The part where a different version of me might have begged, might have asked what I'd done to deserve this, might have tried to negotiate access to my own grandson with a tin of holiday sugar. But I didn't. I took one breath. Not shaky, not dramatic, just a breath. "Hope the roof doesn't leak next month," I said. And then I turned and walked back to my car, still holding the cookies, still holding the Lego set, still holding more of myself than I'd expected. I didn't cry in the driveway. I didn't look back. But my hands shook when I set the box down in the passenger seat. Not because I was sad. Not anymore. I passed 6 months ago. It wasn't about the gift, or the cookies, or even Christmas. It was the fact that I was no longer welcome in a house I co-signed for. Not supported, not appreciated, not needed. Just dismissed. They didn't slam the door behind me, but they might as well have. I pulled away from the curb slowly, the neighborhood still sleepy and quiet, as if the whole world had agreed not to witness what just happened. A couple of houses down, a kid in pajamas was throwing wrapping paper into a trash bag. Across the street, a man waved to his mother-in-law and offered her coffee from the porch. Normal Christmases. Other people's Christmases. Mine had ended with 6 words and a door in my face. But those 6 words? They weren't a curse. They were a key. A reminder that I still had leverage. That kindness doesn't mean surrender. That being quiet all these years hadn't earned me respect. It had just taught them how to ignore me. As I merged onto the main road, my phone buzzed. A calendar alert. Logan's holiday performance, today at 3. A reminder I'd put in weeks ago when I still thought I might be there. I turned it off without opening it. Then I drove home. Not the long way, not to clear my head. Just straight home, in silence, with the heater humming and my heart firming up like concrete. Back in my apartment, I placed the gift on the kitchen counter. I didn't unwrap it, didn't move it to the tree. Just left it there. A reminder that even on the most generous day of the year, some people will choose control over connection. And if they thought this was the end of it, if they believed I would disappear quietly into my knitting and reruns, then they had no idea who they'd locked out. Because I wasn't just a mother. I was a co-owner. And I was done pretending I didn't have a say. The thing about losing your place in someone's life is, it doesn't happen all at once. It happens in soft, quiet ways, like when your thank you becomes an afterthought, or when your name stops being mentioned during stories that used to include you. It started with the invitations. At first, I was always included. Sunday barbecues, pumpkin carving in October, even last-minute dinner runs when Josh had to work late. Claire would call and say, "Logan misses you, Mum. Can you swing by?" And I always did, no matter how tired I was or how much I had going on. I helped when they needed help. The down payment, of course, that was the big one. I co-signed the mortgage because Claire called me crying after their loan fell through. I didn't think twice. I'd just finished paying off my own condo and I thought, this is what mothers do, they step in. But there were other moments too, like covering unexpected daycare costs when Claire lost hours at work, or bringing over groceries when Josh's hours got cut. I didn't keep a ledger. I didn't want one. I just wanted to feel useful, needed, present. In the beginning, Josh always thanked me. He was polite, made just the right amount of eye contact, said things like, "You're a lifesaver, Clara. We couldn't do this without you." And I believed him. I wanted to believe him, because believing meant I had a role in their life, a purpose. Then came the slow fade. It was almost elegant the way they did it. No fights, no scenes, just a mission. Photos that used to include me started cropping me out. Holiday cards arrived without my name in the message. Phone calls got shorter, texts got fewer, until they weren't texts anymore, just forwarded school notices or daycare forms that needed acknowledgement. I remember one Thanksgiving. I showed up with a pie Claire loved since childhood, the one with the pecan crust and cinnamon whipped cream. When I walked in, I realized they'd already eaten. No one told me the time had changed. Claire just smiled and said, "Oh, we thought you weren't coming." Josh barely looked up from his plate. That was the moment I knew I was becoming background noise, a presence tolerated, not welcomed. I didn't say anything then. I smiled, sat quietly, and watched Logan play with his mashed potatoes. I told myself it was a one-time oversight. It wasn't. Birthdays turned into text messages. Family pictures came with excuses. I'd ask when I could take Logan to the zoo, and Claire would say, "We're swamped this weekend, maybe next month." But next month never came. Still, I tried. I'd show up with snacks for Logan's lunchbox, drop off crafts for his room, offer to babysit so they could have a night out. Claire would smile, thank me, and then never follow up. Josh stopped pretending altogether. His hellos turned into nods. His goodbyes became closed doors. What hurt most wasn't the distance. It was the effort I made to pretend the distance wasn't there, to keep showing up with casseroles and small talk, hoping they'd notice, hoping someone would say, "We've been unfair." But no one did. They just made space for me to drift further away. Even Logan, sweet as he was, started echoing their patterns. He stopped asking when I'd come by. He'd see me and smile, but only if I was already there, like I was a surprise guest, not family. And I kept justifying it. They're tired, busy, young parents juggling life. I reminded myself that people pull away sometimes, that it doesn't mean they don't care. But deep down, I felt it. The shift. The slow, quiet erosion of a bond I thought was unbreakable. It didn't snap like a twig. It wore down like stone underwater. And by the time I stood on that porch on Christmas morning, I realized I hadn't been part of their family for a long time. I'd just been clinging to the idea that I still was. The file sat at the bottom of my cabinet in a manila folder, buried under insurance papers and old tax returns. I hadn't looked at it in over 2 years, not since Claire and Josh first closed on the house. But after what happened on Christmas morning, something pulled me toward it like a tug, just beneath the skin. I cleared the kitchen table, set the folder down, and opened it with slow hands. Most of it was familiar. The loan application, the notary stamp, and my signature on the cosigner line. I ran my fingers over the page where I'd agreed to help them, the same one I remembered signing at the bank with Claire whispering, "Thank you, Mum," over and over again. Toward the back, I noticed an addendum stapled to a copy of the refinance notice. I didn't remember that being there. The date was recent, barely a year ago, and right above the line that read co-borrower signature was my name. My breath caught. The loops were wrong. The slant tilted too hard to the left. I blinked, pulled it closer, and stared again. I hadn't signed that. I hadn't even known about a refinance, and yet here it was, sitting in my own files like it belonged. A cold rush ran through me. I flipped through the folder again, looking for any memory, any note or calendar alert that might suggest I'd forgotten. But there was nothing. Not an email. Not a single document tied me to this version of the paperwork. Just that odd signature, pretending to be mine. For a moment, I sat back in the chair, unsure of what I was even seeing. Maybe it was a copy mistake. Maybe they had a second version. Maybe it wasn't malicious. But even as the thoughts came, they felt hollow. Something in my gut had already answered. This wasn't a mix-up. It was deliberate. I grabbed my phone and opened my contacts. Joan's name stared back at me, steady and familiar. She'd worked in a credit union for over 20 years, had notarized my will, my car loan, and even helped Claire with her first bank account. If anyone would know, it was Joan. I texted her. "Are you home tomorrow? Need your eyes on something, mortgage." Her reply came fast. "Always. Come by any time, bring coffee." I set the phone down and looked at the document again, this time holding it like it might bite. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept playing back every moment over the past year that now felt different under this new light. Claire's distant tone. Josh's cold stares. Their constant deflections when I asked about the house. It all added up to something I hadn't been willing to see until now. It wasn't just about being excluded from their lives. It was about being used. Quietly. Intentionally. And if that signature really was a forgery, then this wasn't just personal. It was legal. I slid the folder back into its sleeve and placed it by the door. Tomorrow I'd take it to Joan, but tonight I let the truth sit beside me like a shadow I could finally name. Joan didn't say a word at first. She just took the refinance page from my folder and laid it beside an old loan document she'd notarized for me 2 years earlier. She studied the signature line like it was a puzzle, adjusting her glasses, tracing the loops with her fingertip, then leaning back in her chair. "This one's not yours," she said finally. Her voice wasn't dramatic, just firm, the way someone sounds when they know something for sure and hate having to say it out loud. I nodded once, slowly. I already knew, but hearing her confirm it made the truth solid, heavy. Joan pointed out the differences. The pressure was too light, the angle is off, the date fell on a Sunday. No bank processes refinance paperwork on a Sunday. Her analysis wasn't emotional. It was clinical, evidence-based. And that made it worse, because it meant this wasn't an accident or misunderstanding. It was fraud. My name had been signed to a document that legally reshaped a loan I helped create, and I hadn't seen a dime. Hadn't given permission, hadn't even been told. Someone I loved, someone I trusted, had put pen to paper in my name. That was the part that stuck. The betrayal wasn't loud or messy. It was silent, methodical. I sat there in Joan's kitchen, staring at the page like it might set itself on fire. My heart wasn't racing. My hands didn't shake. What I felt was colder than panic, sharper than heartbreak. I felt clarity. They needed me once, and I was useful. But when that usefulness ran out, they rewrote the rules without me. They took what they wanted, forged what they needed, and assumed I'd never notice. Or worse, that I wouldn't do anything if I did. I gathered the documents carefully, slid them back into the folder and zipped it into my bag like it was classified. Joan poured me coffee. I didn't drink it. I stood up and told her, "Thank you." Then I left. Not in a rush, not angry, just ready. Back home, I pulled out every receipt, email, and message tied to that house. Claire's text from last year, saying Josh would handle the paperwork. Notes from Josh saying I didn't need to come to the bank. All of it was there. Small crumbs that now formed a trail I hadn't noticed before. I opened a new notebook and started a list. Dates, events, names, every moment I'd ignored or brushed off, every red flag I'd folded into a napkin and set aside for the sake of keeping peace. That peace had been built on forgery. They'd forged my name and then locked me out of my grandson's life with the same hands. I thought of Logan's face, of that tin of cookies still sitting on my counter, of all the times I'd told myself family meant compromise. Not anymore. Now it meant consequences. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to beg. I was going to build a case so airtight that even their apologies would come too late. And when it was done, they'd know exactly who they underestimated. I didn't expect the message. It came from an old number I barely recognized. Lisa, one of the assistant teachers from Logan's old daycare, was someone I used to chat with after church before Claire decided that Sunday mornings were too hectic. She kept it simple. "Hey, Miss Clara. I found something I think you'd want to see." 20 minutes later, I was parked behind the building, engine still running. Lisa slipped out a side door like she was carrying something illegal. She looked nervous, said she probably shouldn't be doing this, said she found it in Logan's cubby. Then she handed it to me like it might break if she held on too long. It was a drawing, crayon folded twice. One house. 3 stick figures are standing outside, one small, one medium, one tall. Off to the side, behind a window, was a 4th figure drawn in heavy blue lines. Sad face, arms stretched out. Underneath, in those clumsy, blocky kindergarten letters, were the words, "Grandma is outside." I stared at it in the car for a long time. I didn't cry. Not right away. I ran my fingers along the paper, the way you might touch a photo of someone you miss. I thought of Logan's little hands gripping those crayons. I thought of what it meant that he drew me behind glass, looking in. I thought of how children understand more than we ever want to admit. By the time I got home, the drawing had already changed something in me. Not just the grief, not just the ache of being left out. It was the clarity. Logan remembered. He saw me. He knew I was still there, even if no one else wanted me to be. I made a copy, scanned it into my phone, taped the original to my fridge. Then I opened my messages and found Claire's contact. I didn't type a paragraph, didn't explain. I just sent the image. No caption, no commentary, just the drawing. A child's truth. She didn't respond. Not at first, not that night, not the next morning, but I knew she saw it. The read receipt sat there like a lit fuse. I didn't follow up, I didn't need to. Some messages don't require noise. 2 days later, my phone buzzed while I was rinsing dishes. Claire's name. My heart stuttered, but I let it ring twice before I answered. Her voice was soft, not crying, not cold, just unsure. She asked if we could talk. Said maybe we'd let too much time pass. I said maybe we had. She didn't apologize. Not yet. But she asked about Logan's drawing. Where did I get it? How? I told her it didn't matter. What mattered was what it showed. That Logan, even at 5, felt the distance. That he was already starting to believe love had conditions. She went quiet. Then said she needed time to think. I said okay. Then I hung up. Not angry, not hopeful, just calm. Because, for the first time in months, She didn't hang up on me. Later that night, I sat in the kitchen, staring at the fridge. The drawing was still there, still loud, still true. I thought about what it must have taken for Logan to draw that. How many times he'd looked toward the door and been told I wasn't coming. How many half-truths had been used to explain my absence. I imagined him holding that blue crayon, pressing harder on the window lines, trying to make sure I stayed visible. And I made a decision. I wasn't going to disappear. I wasn't going to be the figure outside the glass forever. The next morning, I started drafting a letter to my lawyer. The same calm I'd felt while staring at that picture stayed with me. No rage, no drama, just a purpose. That little boy remembered me. He still wanted me there. And that was enough to fight for. That was enough to stay in the story, no matter who tried to write me out. The law office was smaller than I expected. Just a few rooms above a sandwich shop, the kind of place you'd walk past without noticing unless you were desperate. I sat in a leather chair that squeaked every time I shifted, folder on my lap, hands clenched tighter than I meant. Her name was Elena, mid-30s, maybe younger, sharp eyes behind clear frames, no jewelry except a thin wedding band. She didn't waste time with small talk, just asked what brought me in and waited while I laid the folder on her desk. I opened it slowly, handed her the refinance copy first, then Joan's notarized comparison. She read without blinking, page after page. Then she looked up and said the words I already knew were coming. This is forgery. What they did, what she did, is mortgage fraud. And because your name is on the original loan, any refinance without your knowledge is illegal. My stomach tightened, but I stayed still. I asked her what my options were. She said it depended on what I wanted. I could press criminal charges. I could demand a full financial audit. I could file a motion to force the sale of the house, which would trigger legal discovery and possibly restitution. I asked what that would look like. She explained it plainly. A judge would review the paperwork. If they agreed I was defrauded, they could order the house to be sold. Proceeds would be split according to the original loan terms. Any equity illegally withdrawn would be investigated. It wasn't just about what Amanda had done, it was about what they did with what wasn't theirs. Eleanor didn't soften it. She didn't sugarcoat. This isn't a family matter, she said. This is a legal one. And the sooner you stop treating it like a personal betrayal and start treating it like a crime, the better off you'll be. Her words didn't hurt. They steadied me, gave shape to something I'd been trying to define. I wasn't overreacting. I wasn't being dramatic. I was a victim of fraud, and it just happened to come from inside my family. She told me to take a day or two to think about it, to be sure I wanted to move forward. I nodded, said I understood, but I already knew. I didn't need time. I had spent too many nights waiting to be included again, to be seen again. That door was closed. I thanked her, gathered the folder, and left the building without looking back. The sun was sharp that day, cutting across the sidewalk in hard lines. I took a deep breath and kept walking, not toward my car, but around the block once, just to let the decision settle in my body. It didn't feel like revenge. It felt like balance, like picking up something that had been thrown away and saying, "This is still mine." I wasn't chasing justice out of spite. I was chasing it because no one else would do it for me. This wasn't just about Amanda anymore, or Josh, or even Claire. This was about Logan, about the version of me he would grow up remembering. I didn't want to be the woman outside the window anymore. I wanted to be the woman who stood her ground. Josh looked like he hadn't slept in days. He stood on my porch with his hands stuffed in his hoodie pocket, eyes flicking around like he was afraid someone else might see him there. I opened the door, but didn't step aside, just stared until he finally spoke. "Can we talk?" he asked. I nodded and pointed to the living room, not bothering with small talk. He sat on the edge of the couch like it might break under him, and I stayed standing. I didn't offer coffee. I didn't ask how Claire was. I placed the folder down on the table between us and opened it to the page with the forged signature. I waited. He didn't look surprised. Not even a flicker. Just dropped his head and let out a breath that sounded more like surrender than relief. She said we had no choice, that if we didn't refinance, we'd lose the house, and you'd never agree. So she signed it. I saw it after. I knew it was wrong. I just let it happen. I crossed my arms, not to shield myself, but to hold back the part of me that still wanted to scream. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't flinch. You let her steal my name, I said. You let her erase me. He nodded like he'd been waiting to hear that out loud. I'm sorry, he said, but it didn't land. I wasn't looking for sorry. I was looking for the truth. Do you know what it means for Logan? I asked. That his father stood by while his mother committed a felony against his grandmother? What story are you going to tell him when he's old enough to ask why I disappeared? Josh looked up then, really looked, and I saw the weight in his face. Not guilt, something deeper. Shame. I didn't know what to do, he said. I was afraid she'd leave and take him. I was afraid I'd lose my son. Then you already lost him, I said, because you let him grow up in a house built on lies. You didn't protect him. You just delayed the truth. He didn't argue, didn't offer excuses, just nodded again, slower this time. I'm not taking the house to punish you, I told him. I'm doing it because I co-own it, because you violated my trust and the law, because this isn't about pride or payback. It's about accountability. He wiped his face with the back of his hand, the way a kid does when they're trying not to cry. What do I need to do? He asked. Tell the truth, I said. All of it. To the court, to Claire, to Logan one day, when he's ready. And don't do it for me. Do it because he deserves to know that silence isn't love. I turned the folder around so he could see the page clearly. Then I handed him a pen. You're going to give a statement. I already have a lawyer. The process has started. You can either help me clean this up, or you can stay quiet and watch it all burn. He didn't hesitate this time. He picked up the pen. Not for you, he said. I know, I said. For him. That was enough. The house wasn't much to look at from the outside. Pale yellow siding, a crooked mailbox, and a yard that hadn't seen a rake in months. But it was mine. Not borrowed, not co-signed. Just mine. The first morning I woke up there, the sun hit the windows just right. The kitchen smelled like fresh paint and black coffee. I stood barefoot on the wood floor and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Stillness. Not the heavy kind, the clean kind. Logan came over that weekend. Josh dropped him off with a backpack, a bag of cereal, and a rolled-up sleeping bag. He ran into the house like it was already his, asking where his room was, where we were going to put the crayons, and if the yard had space for a swing. We spent Saturday afternoon painting the guest room together. He chose light blue and called it sky colour. I let him handle the roller even when it meant cleaning up splatters for an hour afterward. He giggled when paint landed on my glasses and told me I looked like a modern art project. That night, we built a tent from bedsheets and pillows. I let him stay up late watching cartoons while I folded laundry on the couch. When I brought him a glass of water, he was already asleep, one arm flung across a stuffed bear, the other resting on the drawing I'd taped beside the bed. On Sunday morning, we tackled the backyard. We cleared leaves, pulled weeds, and found an old tire swing kit online. He insisted the swing had to face east so it could catch the morning sun. Josh came by in the afternoon and helped hang it from the only decent tree we had. I didn't say much, just handed him the tools and let the silence be enough. Logan swung for nearly an hour, his legs pumping hard, hair flying back. At one point he leaned back and yelled, "This is the best air in the world!" I laughed and didn't correct him. He was right. It was. Later, after dinner, he pulled out markers and a folded sheet of paper. I watched him draw in deep focus, his tongue tucked between his teeth, the way Claire used to when she was little. Then he handed it to me without a word. 3 stick figures, one tall, one medium, one small. A swing, a little square house. And above it all, written in bold purple letters, Grandma's real home. I didn't cry. I just pressed the paper to my chest and nodded. He smiled, crawled into my lap and whispered, "Can we put it on the fridge?" I carried him to the kitchen and let him tape it there himself. That night, after he fell asleep again, I stood in the hallway, staring at the drawing. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was exactly where I was meant to be. Some things don't come full circle. They come apart, piece by piece, and leave you standing in the middle, with just enough strength to build something better. That's what this felt like. Not a return, but a beginning. I thought I wanted the old house back. The porch, the familiar creak in the hallway, the spot where Logan's first drawing used to hang. But the truth is, it was never about the walls or the windows. It was about what lived inside them. And by the time I walked away, the things that mattered were already gone. Now, when I look around this small, new place, I don't see what I lost. I see what I kept. My name, my voice, my grandson's laughter echoing through the hallway. I see dinners without tension, conversations without edits, silence that doesn't ache. I don't hate Claire. I don't even wish Amanda ill. What I feel is smaller, softer, a kind of distance that no longer demands to be closed. I've stopped waiting for them to explain, to apologize, to change. Some people won't ever admit what they did, but that doesn't mean I have to stay in the role they wrote for me. Love isn't quiet when things get hard. It doesn't step aside to keep peace while harm spreads behind closed doors. Love shows up. It speaks up. It protects. And sometimes it draws a line not to divide, but to preserve what's worth keeping. Logan reminded me of that. Not with words, but with crayons and paper and a swing tied to a tree. He never asked me to fight. He just needed me to stay visible. And that was enough. Now we have our own rituals. He comes over every other weekend. We bake muffins from a box mix and pretend they're from scratch. He helps me sort laundry and insists on folding towels his own way. We water the plants he named. He calls the lavender fern, even though it's clearly not. Last Sunday, we sat on the swing in the backyard. The sky was pink, and the air smelled like warm dirt and cut grass. Logan leaned his head on my shoulder and asked if I ever missed the old house. I told him no. Because home isn't where you start. It's where you're safe, where people are kind, where your drawing gets hung on the fridge without anyone asking what it means. He nodded and kicked the ground gently with one foot. Then he looked up and said, "I'm glad you didn't go away for good." I smiled and said, "Me too, kiddo." That was all. No big speech, no tidy bow. Just 2 people swinging quietly under a tree, letting the past stay where it belonged and the future open up like sunlight through the leaves. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was waiting to belong. I already did.